Okay, hello and welcome to our webinar today, 10 Steps to Your Archive. My name is Thomas Stegemann, I'm Technical Sales Manager at Guava EMEA, and I will guide you through this webinar today. So first, something about the content. We will talk a little bit about system requirements of Retain, but more in general, what you can do and how you can split storage and so on, and then we will talk about installation and configuration of Retain. So which steps do you have to go through to get Retain up and running, and most important, settings for Retain. In general, you are in listen-only mode. If you have any questions, use the question section of GoToWebinar or use the chat. And we will send the presentation after the webinar to all attendees, as well as the webinar will be recorded, and so it is available on our channel afterwards. So the first step in the process of installing Retain is the decision which hardware you want to use. And there is a decision for a server and the storage you want to use. And so there are many options you can think of. Is it a physical hardware or is it virtual hardware? Do you want to place the server local, or will it be hosted, or will it be a cloud solution? Everything is possible with Retain, and doesn't matter what you like, we can go with you. We can serve you whatever you like. So can be physical, depending on the size of your company. It may be better to do it physical or virtual. And then do you want to do it local or hosted in a data center or whatever? The same for the storage. You can use local storage, or you can use a NetApp with SnapLock or an EMC Centera to have a warm device where the data stored cannot be deleted for a few years. And for local storage, it can be a SAN, it can be really local disks. So whatever you like. But with the storage, you can divide the Retain storage on multiple disks or multiple tiered storage. So it means the full text index should be placed on a fast local disk, as well as a SQL database we need should be also on a local disk. Whether the real archive storage, so the attachments, can be on a SAN in the network, or local attached SAN. So you can divide, and the SAN can be slower than the local disk, because this is the least part we read. The first is always the SQL database or the index, depending if you're browsing or if you're searching in the archive. And then only if you open a message, it will be loading a file from the local storage. So that's a decision you have to make before you can go to step 2, which is the operating system you want to use. It can be a Windows server, or it can be a SUSE Linux Enterprise server. And for both, we need a web server, which is IIS or Apache, to redirect from the normal port directly to the Retain specific Tomcat port. So first step, hardware. Second step, operating system with IIS or Apache. Third step is the database setup. And whatever you like, we can use MySQL an MS SQL, an Oracle, or a PostgreSQL database. And the most customers use a MySQL database locally installed, but we have also a lot of customers using MS SQL databases and Oracle. Oracle mostly are the bigger, real, or not bigger, big customers. With MS SQL and the tuning advisor of MS SQL, we saw the best results in archiving. We saw with MS SQL up to 40 messages per second. With MySQL, the best results I saw on a customer system was 20 to 25 messages per second. But all of this depends on, do I want to do it local? Do you want to install the database local? Do you want to install the database remote? How many memory do I have to preserve for the SQL database? And about the tuning of the database. And not on that list of value point is licenses. Do you have licenses, or does a customer have licenses for a database already? So if a customer is running an Oracle cluster and they have enough space in that cluster, why not put the retained database there? If they have MS SQL running and there is enough space on that server, use that for the retained database. If they don't have anything, you can start with a MySQL database locally installed. For bigger customers, means over 1,000 users, over 500 users, I would recommend to have a separate database installed, or at least have more memory and more CPU power so that both can run on the same server. And then, yeah, you have to do some tuning on MySQL, on MS SQL, and also on the other ones. We need one user in the database to write. And then we go to step 4, which is the software setup, the real software setup. And as most of you know, we need Java installed on the machine, and we need a Tomcat server, which we will install because we have a specialized version. And then we will install the retained server, the retained worker, and the retained statistics server. And then, you will be guided to the web interface, and in the web interface there will be a wizard which guides you through the first steps of installation of Retain, which is a file path. It is the general file path. So for the first installation, we need one file path where we put everything, and then if you want to put all things in different paths, you can do that afterwards. Then we need the message store database, so you will have to configure the SQL database for the message store. Once that's done, you will be asked for a second database because you can divide the message store and the configuration database, but most of the customers put that into the same database. So by default, you see the same values there. You have just to go to the next step, and then the configuration database is also configured. Then you have to set an administrator password and the SMTP notification settings, so SMTP server and so on, so that you will see when you will, so that you can get notifications about the running jobs and error messages and so on. I will answer all the questions after the webinar, so don't hesitate to send questions, but I will answer them afterwards. And then you have to select the indexing engine, which is currently Lucene or Exalead. With Retain 4, we will make a new step and have a new clustered index engine for big customers, so that they can cluster it on different servers and the workload can be put on multiple servers, so that it is will be a lot faster for big customers. Okay, after step 5, after this you have to set the general settings. And the first thing you have to decide when you have installed Retain and you use a local storage, do I want to use AES encryption? If you want to use it, please enable it directly after you installed Retain, because then every attachment which will be stored in the storage, in a local or in the SAN, will be encrypted via AES. The next thing is, if you have a Centera or a NetApp, now it is the time to change from the standard engine to Centera or NetApp, so that all the attachments will be stored on that storage device. Also, there is a point shown here, enable file consolidation, which means you can enable it and then we will consolidate 100 small files into one zip container on local storage, which will be a lot faster for backup solutions and so on. And then the last one is index. You should decide which document types you want to index and enable all which you need to have indexed, or disable the ones you don't want to index. Maybe you don't want to index PDFs or documents or whatever. If you want to enable it, do so, or do disable whatever you like. So that's the next step you have to do before the general setup of a job. So once that's done, you need to make the connection to the mail system. In this case, we have two modules configured, which is GroupWise and Exchange, and we need some specific rights for it. We need a trusted application key and a SOAP IP and port for the GroupWise. We need you can also enable LDAP authentication, and you can have proxy rights enabled, so that a user who has proxy rights to another mailbox has it in the archive as well. For Exchange, we need a user who has impersonation rights. For hosted services, there is an option to download the address book in a different way, and we need to have the Active Directory connection, so IP address or domain of the Active Directory controller, username and password, and then if there is one available, the user forest to download the users from Active Directory. And also in Exchange, we support delegation rights, which are similar to the proxy rights in GroupWise. So this is also possible. And we have other modules. We have a social module, we have a Google Apps module, we have a BlackBerry module, and we have a mobile or Android module. So for the social messaging, we need, or you need to download the virtual appliance and then make the gateway settings in the social messaging. The virtual appliance is a proxy server which will filter all the content for Facebook and Twitter and guide all the data to the Retain server. The Google Apps module needs the connection settings and the domain name, the authentication key, and the authentication secret, which you can set in Google Apps. And then we can download the address book, and we can archive messages from Google Mail. But only Google Mail for Business, so not the former free version of Google Apps, or not even the private Google Mail part. For BlackBerry, in the BlackBerry connector, you can set the log directory where we can find the BAS logs, and you have an SMTP connector which can send all the messages to a mail server. And for the Android module, there is currently, you need a tenant ID, which you get from us, because currently you need an instance in our Guava Guava Cloud. So currently it's a cloud-based router for Android, and you need to decide how the provisioning of the app for Android will be done. For Retain 3.3, there will be a new mobile, not mobile router, yeah, a mobile router, but an on-prem mobile router. So it means you can download a mobile router and then place it in your company and have your Android devices connected to this router, and then the messages don't have to be sent through our router in the cloud. Okay, and once you have configured the module and we have read the address book from GroupWise or the Active Directory, then you can start to set up a job. And the first thing is to schedule the task for the job. So means there can be a single schedule. A single schedule is mostly used for first-time jobs, just to try if everything is fine, or for user where you want to remove old users which you don't want to have in your mail system anymore. Then you can set up a single schedule just for this user and just for this job. Or you would set a recurring schedule, and you can select the day when it has to run and the job time, and you can set the maximum duration of the job, which means if you start a job in the evening at 8 o'clock and let it run for 5 hours, so it will stop at 1 o'clock in the morning, and then you can set that it's starting again in the evening at 8 and so on, so that it's not running during your business hours. After that, you need to set up the profile, so what you want to archive. And for Exchange, it's only enable archiving in the first on the first tab of the profile. For GroupWise, there are a few more options, like mark email as archived and so on. But for Exchange, it's only enable archiving. Then you have to decide which type you want to archive. So first, mailbox type, user, room equipment mailboxes, or resource mailboxes in GroupWise. Which item types you want to archive. Maybe you don't want to archive appointments or notes or tasks, or you want to archive everything. Doesn't matter for us. Just select what you want. And the item source, also received, sent, draft, posted, depends a little bit on what you want to archive. And the message status as well. If you allow private messages, for example, and you don't want to archive them, then set private as false, so that private messages are not being archived, or even confidential messages or so on. So you can decide what you want to archive. On the next tab, you can decide which date range you want to scan. in the first step, it should be all messages, and then you can switch to, or you can switch before, but can be all messages, which means everything until the job started, or you can set all messages older than, and then set to, for example, 14 days from job start, which means that we will only archive messages which are older than 14 days, which gives the user time to move the emails into the correct folder so that we have the folder structure in retain as well. And based on the duplicate check, if you set it not to try to publish all messages but use the item store flag, then we will only read newer mails. The item store flag is always set to the date and time of the email which was archived last. So after a while, it will only be one day which we archive every day with retain. And on the miscellaneous tab, you can set different things like store all attachments or don't store any attachments. But the most important setting here is the include users recoverable items. So on Exchange, we have a dumpster, and the dumpster is set normally by default to 30 days. And with this option, even if a user deletes a message and purchases it from the trash, we can read it out of the dumpster from Exchange, and it will be available in retain. And we can also include users archive mailbox. So if you have an Exchange archiving, which is not really an archiving solution, which is a copy of the current mailbox or a move of data from one mailbox to another, which belongs to the same user, we can archive that as well. Also, public folders are possible, but if you archive them for everybody so that everybody has the information out of the public folder in his archive, it is a lot slower because we have to change the mailbox every time there is a public folder, and that costs a lot of time. And for the journaling mailbox, you can also decide to not store it in one folder, but store it in folders divided by year or year and month, so that you not have one flat list of all emails, but have a list for every year or month. And then you can have advanced criteria on the last tab, like attachment name, subject, categories, whatever, and also decide on a folder scope that you want to archive only specific folders or accept specific folders. Meaning if you allow private messages, you can tell the users that they have to place it in a folder private, and then you can accept this folder from being archived. Or if you say, okay, we want to archive only messages from a folder called archived, then that's also possible by selecting a folder which you want to archive. Next one is that you have to set up the worker. The worker is pretty easy in an environment with one mail server. Then you just have to create a new worker, give it a name, save it. Then there is a bootstrap file which you have to download, and you have to upload the configuration bootstrap file to the worker page. And then it's configured with the default settings. It will ask the retain server every 10 minutes for new messages, and then will for new messages for new jobs, and then it will run a job if available for the worker. And then we can start archiving. We can combine all these three, so the schedule, the profile, and the worker, to a job. And so here select the schedule, the profile, and the worker. And then with the data expiration, you can set the data expiration, for example, for a NetApp or in Centera, so that through the API we will set the expiration date in on the NetApp or Centera. And also, if you set this one, you can, if you set the expiry date, we can do the deletion based on this expiration date. So that's also possible directly in Retain. Then you have to select the mailboxes, the complete mail server or a distribution list or only users, which can be included, or even you can exclude users from being archived if you have an informational account. If you have an account like we have for only newsletters, then you can exclude these users from being archived. So select the mail server and exclude users is possible. And then if you save it, you have to wait. You have to wait a few minutes, a few hours, depending on the size of the mail system, on the user number of users, and for sure on the size of message database you have. And at some point it is ready, so all your mails are in the archive, and you can start using Retain. You can search Retain, you can use the plugin for Outlook, or you can use GroupWise to search in the archive, or you can use the web interface to directly go to your archive and search for your messages. So you see, archiving is essential and archiving is easy. It is nothing which is very complicated to set up. And if you have more questions, if you need a trial version, or if you need a more detailed web demonstration, please contact me or us here in our office. We will help you with free consulting on how to get things started, on how to the best way to implement it, and we will guide you to our resellers, or we can do a meeting and tell you what are the next steps. And then the last thing is that I want to mention our Guava conference in Berlin this year, which is the first IT conference for messaging experts, which will concentrate not only on Novell GroupWise but also on Microsoft Exchange, both together on one show, showing their best mail servers and collaboration servers in a 2-day conference in October in Berlin. So now I'd like to thank you for your attendance, and if you have questions, please contact us so that we can help you understand more about Guava Retain.